they would move strike, protect.
If you want to hit somebody at with the most power, you have to make use of that momentum.
The whipping action.
Yeah, it's the whipping action, but then also the extension of the entire arm.
If I want to cut, I'm going to basically hit the opponent. Hold an Indian club, a 2-pound Indian club in one hand, and a sword from that era in the other, and the balance was identical, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the story of how the mule swing came around, the classic mule swing, inward swing.
Dutchman, yeah, shuffle on the production, like this, yeah, like this, yeah. The flowing Dutchman, yeah, the flowing Dutchman.
So I'm here with the man, Wolkowinski, and he's been, you know, teaching and mastering the art of Indian club swinging for a long, long time. And one of the things that is really fascinating about the Indian clubs, it is so similar to a sword, because the weight distribution and the way that the handle fits into your hand and the weight actually moves makes it very similar to a sword.
Yeah.
Now, do you know if they actually use it for sword training, or was it more after?
No, so yes, I mean basically when the English were in India,
Yeah.
the British military moved into India during the Raj, and they had to transport swords made in England from metal to India.
Okay.
Then during that period, some very clever person decided that an Indian club could be the equivalent of a sword, because the movements were so similar, but they took those clubs from the mudgar and the jewelry, and obviously made a smaller club. And the first clubs that were made were about 4 pounds, 4 pounds weight-wise, and they were shaped like this here. They were kind of that
military clubs.
Yeah, but I mean they were shaped like the mudgar, but it was a sort of smaller, shorter version of this type of thing. And then eventually it morphed into a shape like this, which has the center of mass basically round about here, and it has the tail and obviously the handle and so on.
And did that progression happen in India, or did it happen in?
It happened. I think it happened in India, from what I know. And I mean, you've also got to think about it this way: that India and Persia at certain times shared a border.
Yeah.
So the concept of clubs, because the Indians say they invented them, the Persians say they invented the clubs, and I mean, and I'm not going to get into a dispute about it, but this would have been seen by the British military as they went to and fro overland from England through Europe into Iran or Persia in those days into India.
So the progression towards the smaller club that would look more like a sword, because you don't find those a lot in India.
No, you don't. They were used in India to a certain degree, but I think the sword thing is what interests me the most. And I had an opportunity at one stage in California to actually hold an Indian club, a 2-pound Indian club in one hand, and a sword from that era in the other, and the balance was identical, which is amazing. So consequently, there's a very good reason why a 2-pound club was basically used, because it was the equivalent of a sword. It could be made locally in India, so they didn't have to have this sort of situation of swords being used in practice and getting damaged, so they cut the expense down. Now, so what I wanted to show you was this. So with Indian clubs, when you're swinging a club, the most common way is to swing on the frontal plane. So you're swinging on the frontal plane here, and it's very important that my palm is facing the back at the moment, and when it's on this side, it's facing the front. The question is why? And I'm just going to go to a saber to demonstrate it, and I'm going to point it directly at the camera. So if I stand sideways and I point the sword directly at the camera, if I want to cut, I'm going to basically hit the opponent. But if I have my palm facing up, look what happens to the tip of the sword. It goes completely off kilter, and I'm going to miss the opponent. And if my palm faces down, That's what happens here. Now, very common, so that's a really important thing to remember, because now the same thing happens with Indian clubs. If I drop my palm back, it twists to the back. Forward, it twists to forward. So I can't stress enough how important that is. So as the club comes over, comes round to the back, comes straight up, and it points all the time on the frontal plane.
It's like you point the soft part of your hand on the back always to the ground.
Yeah. And so the basis, so now we've done. So this would be sort of like an upper slash with a sword, and going inwards, you would basically then inwards you would cut down with the sword, swing it back up, and then you're ready to go again.
Yeah, the difficult part then that is usually overlooked is that little internal and external rotation.
Yes.
Because that's the only thing that really occurs during the swing is when you're going down and you're pointing into the saber, other than going from hammer to saber, is actually that point where it turns.
You're going to turn
pronate,
yes,
or basically more internally rotate the shoulder instead of a combination, but then move in and then you do the exact same during the backswing. So that's opening the shoulder blades, which allows that arm to open.
Yeah. So, but I think it's also very interesting to mention that on the frontal plane again, if I bring the club down to here, and if I'm going to go into the classic heart shape, so my pivot point is on my shoulder here, and now as I come up, the pivot point goes into my elbow, and then basically a hand grip changes the position of the club again. The club comes to the back, elbow pointing forward, shoulder opens out, club comes up, changes position again into the saber grip.
Yeah,
so
now
you've
the
got
rotation point.
now the rotation point goes back to the shoulder. So you know the position of the club coming up here is really important because you've got that momentum to straighten the club out, and then the club and the arm become one. They should be a straight line.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that is, I think, the correlation between the sword and the club too. Because if you want to hit somebody at with the most power, you have to make use of that momentum.
The whipping action.
It's the whipping action, but then also the extension of the entire arm with the whipping action.
With the whipping,
This is actually the highest impact, or it has the most speed, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So you wind up the club from the front swing, and then you turn it into the back swing, and then you release, and then maximum.
That's right, exactly. And what I think is really interesting, and I don't know if you've heard the legend about Cyrus the Great in Persia, and why he started training his military with meals. Have I told you that story? Okay, so I'll show you. So I'm just going to use a pair of light meals here, and I'll just pop over here. So we've got the same thing. Actually, I'll just grab a sword to start with. So you've got to imagine that this is my shield. So I'm holding my shield, and the military would stand facing. They would stand face their opponents with the shields in front. So there'll be a row of men and a row of shields here. And then on a command, they would move strike, protect, here. So then Cyrus the Great said, or so the story goes, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but I mean, of
course, but hey, it's a story. So
it's a great story.
Let's make it better.
So basically, then with meals, it morphed. He wanted his soldiers to work with equipment that was 2 to 3 times heavier than the swords and shields. So 3 kilos, 4 kilos would be about the right sort of weight, and you've got to consider that the armies in those days were fighting all day. I mean, so endurance was a big part of what they were doing. So then, again, for instance, if you imagine that, in a military point of view, swing, attack, move the shield out of the way, but now we can do it in reverse. So, and there's the movement here. So they change over the sword and shield, sword and shield.
Yeah.
And that's the story of how the meal swing came around, the classic meal swing, inward swing.
And that is also the difference between a meal and a light club or an Indian club,
Yes.
so a heavy club and a light club.
Yeah.
Because this would be like the activation of the sword, but then controlling it back to actually the stability where you would hold the shield.
Yeah.
Which is also very necessary, because if you're in battle, you're not just swinging all the time. You're also
No, that's right. You've got to use a shield to protect your body,
yeah.
and so you've got to be active.
So would a meal then be kind of more like a shield than a sword?
It's
it's interesting because the sword movement doesn't really, like, the meal is a throw, but it's also not really a throw.
No. So, I think it's been modified. Because it stops here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you then went into, so let's do a meal swing now with an Indian club. So there's the swing to here.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, if I went to swing and, I mean, the impact would be huge.
Yeah.
So the training basically was for the shoulders and the upper body, because the balance and everything else, and I mean your body's changing balance all the time because you've got the transfer of balance from the one foot to the other.
Yeah, you can't really practice a sword swing with a very heavy club. So if you want to build the strength and for the impact, you do need to have some type of a heavier.
Yes.
But you have to have a controlled swing, because if you start doing meal swings like that,
yeah. I mean, I don't think your elbows would really appreciate because I mean, with such a huge center of mass far away from the wrist, it would affect the elbows. Because I mean I'm basing that on my first mace swings years ago. I mean, I started with a 12 kilo steel mace. And my son and I was really struggling, 5 swings each way, and there were 360s, and basically we were swinging from our wrists instead of the elbow.
Yeah, that's really dangerous.
Yeah, which is, it's very dangerous, but I mean, I had nobody to ask about it at the time. And then, over a period of time, I realized that was the wrong way around. So you've got to have that sort of, the elbow comes first, then the wrist, then the club, and then it comes down here, and then the club goes up first, followed by the wrist, and then the elbow. So I mean, it's got to be in that form of rotation.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that I think it's so exciting about this that with hang on, I'm going to do it with this.
Yeah.
So actually, Chris Denning's just done a video, and I did a video years ago of snakes and daggers. Called it. I mean, on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So I couldn't figure out why this grip was in place in Indian club works. I mean, this grip is here, and that one there. A snake. But then I started looking up, sort of like fighting with daggers, because basically, in some ways, there's a similarity here. I mean, like a dagger. So I thought to myself, well, in the Snakes and Daggers video, you should watch it, I explain the fact, I mean, you've got the change of grip here, so that means that you can ice pick your opponent. And during the days of knights in shining armor and those knights, they would often go for the space between the helmet and the body armor, which was in the neck here. That wasn't very well protected. And it was a 3-sided dagger. It's a really nasty piece of work. I mean, it's about that length. You can imagine the damage that would do. So if the dagger would be, I forget now which side they wore them on, but they actually wore them on maybe that side. So you'd have to, because you've got the option of either going up like this, or if you then change the position, ice pick type of style.
So it's about the transition, actually.
It's about the transition, and I think that the snake, as we know it like this, that movement there, comes from transitioning grips for use in the military sense. So there's a lot of combinations here, going into or coming in from sort of old wartime, habits, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's really.
It is.
Thanks, Paul.
That's all right. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Over the years, I've found so much joy in creation. Light Club 6 is designed to bring that joy of creation to your screen. Through 3 sessions every week, you'll be exposed to increasingly challenging movement patterns with Indian clubs. In the first week, you'll learn about crossing swings. In the second week, you'll learn about parallel swings. And in the third week, you'll learn how to combine the parallel and the crossing swings. In the fourth week, you will master wrist circles. And in the fifth week, we'll dissect asynchronous swings. And lastly, in the sixth week, you'll learn how to combine the synchronous swings and the asynchronous swings. At the end of Light Club 6, the word beginner will not fit you anymore. Are you ready to structure and perfect the art of Indian club swinging? Join now at DutchFlowAcademy.com. Boom! Thank you for your attention. It's greatly appreciated. If you like the content, please consider to share, like, and subscribe to my channel. If you want to see similar videos, you can see them over here. If you're interested in learning more from me as a coach, I've got online courses on DutchFlowAcademy.com. Keep flowing. Ram Ram.